very interesting, actually. Let's bring on Maureen Satriano. Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm well, Polly. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, thank you. Now, my first question to you, that we're kind of calling this, what are we calling it? MMR vaccine failure. So my first question to you is, when did you get your first vaccine? I know the answer to this, but I want everyone to hear this, because at 9 months old, which vaccine did you get?
The single-dose measles vaccine, just by itself.
Single dose measles. Right. Well, so just so you know, and to viewers listening, I have a horrible feeling that this new administration are going to maybe potentially try and bring back the single measles vaccine. And I personally am horrified by that. Just so you know, I'm just going to put that right on out there. I am horrified by that. There is no such thing as a safe and effective vaccine. And in my mind, there never will be. We don't need it. I'm just going to put that out there. But you had the single measles vaccine. Okay, continue and tell everybody your story.
I have subsequently had 3 more MMRs because I'm a nurse. So I had that first measles vaccine by itself when I was 9 months old. Then when I was in college in the 80s, someone in the United States, a college-age student, got measles during spring break time. And they decided that every college student at that time would need a booster in order to continue going to school for the rest of that semester. Being the rebel that I am, I was like, well, I'm not doing that. So I went back to college without another MMR, and was humiliated in front of about 250 people when they made me stand up in front of a big seminar and called out the people who didn't have their documentation. So I was the only one of those 250 people that were called out. I was asked to leave the campus until I got my measles vaccine. So I left the campus and didn't come back until they told me that I wasn't going to get credit for my, I was not allowed to come onto campus to take my finals unless I had the vaccine. So I wasn't going to get any credit for that semester. So at that point, I did get the MMR, went back, finished my semester. Several years later, I went to nursing school, and they checked my titers to make sure that I had enough to start my clinicals in nursing school, and my titers were not high enough, so they gave me another MMR. So now I had 1 single measles vaccine and 2 MMRs.
And how are you feeling at this point? Are you getting any injuries or anything, or you seem all right?
I seem all right. Nothing that I know of.
Okay.
2 years later, I got a job at the same hospital where I had gone to nursing school, and I was working on an AIDS unit. So they wanted everyone to have enough titers to be working with immunocompromised patients. I had already had an appointment with the hospital's, personnel health doctor, and she said, I'm going to give you a 3rd MMR because your titers have not converted high enough for you to work with AIDS patients. So I agreed to it, and that was my 3rd MMR, my 4th measles. 2 months later, I came back to the doctor's office at the hospital, and I was sitting on the exam table in the exam room waiting for the doctor to come in, and I looked down at the table, and my chart was open, and there was my titers results, and it said vaccine failure on the piece of paper. And I was quite delighted, actually, because I thought, yes!
And there it is, vaccine failure.
Yeah. So then every year I went back for another exam that we had to do, health exam every year, and each one it said vaccine failure. So when the doctor came in, she looked at the chart and she said to me, they're not high enough. What does it feel like to be a failure? And I said, I do believe your piece of paper says that the vaccine is the failure, not me. And she sort of rolled her eyes. And I said, yeah, that's just my body's way of telling you I don't want your vaccine. Thank you very much.
Have you ever had measles?
No,
Never had anything.
no.
So what happens after that? I mean, do you have to take other vaccines? What's the deal?
So I've never had another vaccine since that, except to get into, I needed a yellow fever vaccine once to get into Kenya, I think it was. I forget which country it was. A country in Africa I needed to get, or maybe Rwanda. I did get a yellow fever vaccine. But then in 2018, I was the school nurse at a school in New York where there was a measles outbreak in our county. And we were being warned by the county Department of Health that they were going to not allow children who were unvaccinated for measles to come to school anymore. If the measles got into our zip code or something like that, there was some parameter for that they were going to decide. So in preparation for that, they kept sending us these letters. They kept raising the requirement that first it was 70% of the population in our school had to be vaccinated. Then they changed it to 80% had to be vaccinated. Then finally they decided 95% of the students had to be vaccinated in order for the other 5% to come to school unvaccinated. Anyway, to make a long story short, I was trying to find out if this, when they excluded children, were they going to include the teachers or staff members? Knowing my situation, that I wasn't going to have immunity, I was not going to get another one at this point. And so I spoke to the health department and I said, what about adults? If they don't have enough immunity by titers, or if they haven't had enough MMRs to please you, the health department told me that 2 MMRs was enough for anyone. They were not going to check titers. They didn't really care if the titers were high enough, and they weren't going to exclude teachers or staff. They were only excluding children. It didn't matter to them if parents, teachers, staff members went around with measles. That was okay, but the students just couldn't come unless they had 2 MMRs or could show documented titers.
So basically, you've just proven that the vaccine does not work.
Exactly.
So, Maureen, what do you think about all vaccines? Because I don't know whether your story is fascinating, but you're not injured. Have you seen people that are injured from vaccinations?
I've seen many, many, many children. In fact, part of the school that I was a nurse at, there was a separate school that I used to consult with, and the health department actually asked me, what's this other school this other name of the school? Is that part of your high school or what? And I said, no, that's actually the school where all the vaccine injured children are. So I've seen plenty of vaccine injury. I was taught in my nurse practitioner program at an Ivy League school in New York that whatever you do, if a parent comes in, you believe what the parent says. If a parent tells you that there's something off with their child, you need to do something about this, because the parent's instinct is what drives your next step in terms of examining a child. Now, all of a sudden, we're told you don't have to, parents, what they're telling you about their child's vaccine injury isn't true. We're sort of taught to gaslight people, even though in school you're taught to listen to what the parent says. So the way that I became more aware of this was just to listen to parents. A parent knows what their child was like before they got a vaccine and what they're like after. And I've seen tons and tons of injury. And that's why I felt like I wanted to tell you that another not as sad, disappointing story, but that even when the vaccine doesn't injure people, it sometimes doesn't work anyway.
You did phenomenally well to have 3 MMRs and a single measles shot and not get injured, to be honest with you.
Yeah. My teenage children would probably tell me that there's something wrong with me and it was probably that MMR, but those are teenage children.
Well, it's a fascinating story, Maureen, and we thank you so much for being with us and educating us on this. It's just another I mean, we're talking about measles and MMR all last week. We're going to keep continuing to do it as well all this week until people understand the true dangers of that vaccine. And now you've just shown us it doesn't even work anyway. So we appreciate you so much for coming on. Thank you so much, Maureen.
Thank you for having me.